Chapter 28. The Teacher with the Long Fingernail. Like moths, the children went to the light. "Welcome, welcome, glad you're here, come in," the woman said as they filed past and joined the other kids in her class. "I'm sorry, I don't have enough desks, but we'll make do. Please find a place on the floor for now." The children did as they were told. They felt safe, even if a bit uncomfortable. They could no longer feel the school shake or hear the Kachuga boops. "Miss Zarves," said Mrs. Jules, "it's so good to see you. How long has it been?" "Feels like forever," said Miss Zarves. "I never bump into you in the teacher's lounge," said Mrs. Jules. "We must just keep missing each other." "I try not to bump into people," said Miss Zarves. Miss Zarves was tall and thin. Her skirt and blouse were neat and trim. Her short hair looked shiny and silky and smelled like strawberry shampoo. Everything about her was neat and orderly, except for that one fingernail. "And how's Mavis?" asked Miss Zarves. Mavis was Mrs. Jules' daughter. "Adorable," said Mrs. Jules, "but they grow up so fast, don't they?" "I wouldn't know," said Miss Zarves. "You don't look like you've aged a day," said Mrs. Jules. "Very nice of you to say," said Miss Zarves. Mrs. Jules wasn't just being nice. Miss Zarves hadn't changed one bit, except for her fingernail, of course, which had grown considerably longer. Calvin walked between the two teachers. "Excuse me, Miss Zarves," he said. "I think I'm supposed to give you this." He handed Miss Zarves a folded piece of paper that was so old it tore as Miss Zarves unfolded it. She strained to read the faded writing. "Oh, okay," she said to Mrs. Jules, then dropped the note in the garbage. "Is that the note I gave you to give to Miss Zarves?" Mrs. Jules asked Calvin. Calvin shrugged. "I just found it in my pocket," he said, sounding even more surprised than Mrs. Jules. Mrs. Jules stared at him. "You told me you gave it to her," she accused. "I don't think I ever said that," said Calvin. Mrs. Jules continued to stare as he returned to his seat on the floor. "We were just about to have our history review," said Miss Zarves. "Who's your best history student?" "Myron," Mrs. Jules answered without hesitation. Myron had gotten the highest score on the history portion of the ultimate test. "Myron, stand up, please," said Miss Zarves. He stood. "What kind of shoes did Mary Bopkins like to wear?" Miss Zarves asked him. "Who?" asked Myron. The kids from Miss Zarves' class giggled. "No laughing," said Miss Zarves. "We don't laugh at people who are not smart." "Don't feel bad, Myron. You may not be smart now, but once you've been in my class for a few years, you'll know the history of everybody. Mark, would you please tell Myron the answer?" "A few years?" Myron asked, but Miss Zarves ignored the question. Mark Miller stood up. "Which Mary Bopkins do you mean?" he asked. "The one born in 1801 in Boston or the one born in 1954 in San Francisco?" "Boston," said Miss Zarves. "Red boots," said Mark. "Excellent," said Miss Zarves. "Who's Mary Bopkins?" asked Mrs. Jules. "Was she famous?" "Why?" asked Miss Zarves. "Does your class only study famous people? Do you think famous people are more important than people who aren't famous?" "But there isn't enough time to study everyone," said Mrs. Jules. "We don't play favorites in my class," said Miss Zarves. She went to the back closet and took out several giant stacks of papers. "This is everyone born in 1837. She went around the room, handing each student a stack of 100 pages or more. "When you finish studying a page, please pass it on to someone else." Myron stared helplessly at his stack. "I can't even read this," he complained. "I think it's Chinese." Well, yes, a lot of people were born in China, said Miss Sarves. She handed Myron a Chinese dictionary and said, "You'll need this." It is impossible to say how long Myron sat there, fumbling through the dictionary as the kids around him were passing around their sheets of paper. He might have been there an hour, or a day, or a week. Time passes slowly when you're trying to read a Chinese dictionary, even if you're Chinese. He glanced up and spotted a pair of scissors on Mark Miller's desk. He got an idea. "Hey, Mark, can I borrow these for a sec?" Myron asked. "Sure," said Mark. Myron took the scissors, then walked bravely to the front of the room. He didn't know if his plan would work. In fact, it really didn't make any sense, but it was his only HOPE. "Excuse me, Miss Sarves, I can trim your fingernail for you if you would like," he offered. "My fingernail?" asked Miss Sarves, astonished by such a suggestion. "Which one?" "The long one on the end," said Myron. Miss Sarves looked at her hand. Now that you mention it, it has gotten long. I guess I hadn't noticed because it grew so slowly." She held out her hand. Myron pressed hard on the scissors and snipped it off. "That does feel better," said Miss Sarves. "Thank you, Myron." Myron held the fingernail up in the air, except he was no longer standing in the front of the classroom. He was standing on the stairs, and everyone else from Mrs. Jewell's class lay sprawled across the staircase. "1,000,000!" he shouted triumphantly.